Professor Steiner here. What I want to talk about is a subject that will probably be of serious, I hope it's of serious interest to parents, as well as anybody else, because bullying, which is the subject I want to talk about, is not a phenomenon that affects only children. It affects adults too. And bullying is I fortunately when I was younger, I had very rare, maybe one or two occasions when I was a child when I was bullied, and they were unpleasant, and I'd like to hack the head off the person who did the bullying, but it really wasn't a major problem. The last 20 years or so, because I make it a habit every day to study, used to be newspapers, but of late, since the use of the internet, the New York Daily News online and other newspapers, to study the violent crimes and the reports of bullying, children committing suicide because they've been cyberbullied or pushed around. And then there was this videotape that was placed on YouTube of this collection of swine, boys attacking a girl, knocking her to the sidewalk and beating her, stealing her phone and her shoes. Now, I don't want to say what my punishment for those boys would be. It might tend to incriminate me. But suffice it to say that I think that that's one of the ugliest acts I've ever seen. And bullying is an ugly act. There's a big difference between someone who likes to fight. He's very aggressive. He's got an aggressive disposition. And he takes up judo or karate or boxing or wrestling, or whatever. Fine. No problem with that. If that's where you channel your aggressiveness, good for you. When you're fighting with somebody who wants to fight with you in a sporting context, it's a game, and there's nothing wrong with that. But any individual who uses whatever physical prowess he has or imagines he has to denigrate and humiliate and physically abuse another person who he judges to be readily vulnerable, anybody like that is lower than the scum of the earth. This is not a human being, and in my opinion, he doesn't deserve to be treated like a human being. I don't want to hear about he was bullied in his childhood, so he's just repeating the process. People use that excuse for child molesters too, and you would think that someone who was bullied in his childhood knows how unpleasant it is and wouldn't do it if he had the character that God gave any decent person. Bullying is an ugly act as well as an evil one. And the way to confront bullies is stop them when they try to bully you. Now, for an adult, bullying is a physical attack outright. Physically bullying is a physical attack. You don't say, well, because this guy only shoved me against a wall, I don't really want to hurt him. If one adult shoves another adult back against a wall, he's going to follow that up by moving in and punching him. And you're not going to let it happen if it happens to you. The way to handle a bully is to hurt him badly and immediately. Give him the message loud and clear. You touch me and you're going to bring down hell on yourself. Now, that's an unpopular expression, the way I voiced it. Soft souls will mind that, and they don't want to hear that. Can't you just get the bully under control? That'll get him under control. If you don't think that somebody kicked in the testicles or smashed across the eyes or smashed in the solar plexus or had his knee stomped is not gotten under a modicum of control, you haven't seen it done. It works like a charm. It works like a charm. I'll tell you what doesn't work. If you're a parent, I'm not a parent, but I like children and I feel very, very sorry and compassionate for children. I don't teach children except exceptionally. But if you happen to be a martial arts teacher and you do teach children, teach them to do a good job and defend themselves with real force. And for children, that force, in my opinion, should take the form of boxing and judo. This is the best kind of program for a child. When I say a child, I mean somebody in elementary school. I mean somebody who's in grade school, 9, 10 years old. Now, if we're talking about a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, well, that person should be under adult supervision. You're not going to teach combat techniques to an infant. But boxing and judo, and I'm talking about Kodokan judo and Western boxing, those two subjects studied assiduously for a few months each will put in the hands of the average kid more than enough ability to handle a contemporary who attempts to bully him. Unfortunately, what sometimes happens is a bully will be an older teenager, a much larger kid, or an adult. Well, anytime a child has to defend against an adult, that calls for techniques like we teach in American Combato. And as I say, I teach children very rarely, and I think they should learn the types of techniques that we teach only judiciously and only if the parents know full well that these children are not inclined to violence of any kind, that they despise violence and they do whatever they can to avoid it. Because it's very dangerous for a child to be instructed in the kind of techniques that we do. If the child is mature and nonviolent and reasonable, it's fine. And I have had a few children like that. But they were very carefully selected. I knew the parents and whatnot, and that worked out fine. Children have a right to fight back and defend themselves. The school that has a policy of zero tolerance for violence has to be put on notice by a responsible parent that their child has their permission to defend themselves. And if that school expels a little boy or little girl who defends him or herself, then that school and that principal and those teachers should be sued. They should be taken to task because that's child abuse. Do you tell a child they shouldn't go to the restroom if they have to go? Do you tell a child they shouldn't have a glass of water if they're thirsty? What kind of nonsense is that? Someone who is under attack has a right to defend themselves. Well, you're just being as bad as the bully. Bullshit! What kind of moron could believe that? You're being as bad as the bully. Well, using that kind of logic and extending it to higher levels, we were just as bad as the Japanese going after them when they bombed Pearl Harbor. We should allow the Nazis to run rampant over Europe. The hell with that. Well, we're not going to stoop to their level. And after all, why should a police officer stoop to the level of an armed felon and shoot back? And God forbid, shoot that felon. I think I made my point. Teach your children to fight back hard. A bully is contemptible. Teach them that too. There was a great story on the news. Must have been about 2 years ago. It really was a great story. I believe it took place in a high school. This case of arrested development that had grown to teenage years, started picking on a blind boy. And another boy, who I believe was on the football team, interceded immediately and knocked him to the ground. Too bad he stopped there. But there you have an example of righteous conduct. That kid told himself what most people would tell themselves if their heads were screwed on right. You keep your hands to yourself. Well, bullying is that. In this case, the boy was blind. In other cases, the kid may be small. In other cases, the kid may be very timid. In other cases, the kid may just be a good student, and these bastards are jealous of him. On no account should a bully get away with bullying without a lot of black and blue marks and maybe a couple of weeks in bed because he can't walk. Bullies are contemptible lice. This is the view that should be taken of them. Not that they are, well, they're misguided kids. They need understanding. You're too harsh. No, I'm not too harsh. They are too harsh on their victims. And what is to be said of all these kids of late, and this, I have to say, never happened when I was in school, who kill themselves because they've been bullied. Why are they killing themselves? They didn't do it when I was going to school, because when I was going to school, you were taught, fight back. If somebody's picking on you, whack them. Belt them in the head. Fight back. Don't let them push you around. What are the kids taught today? Oh, tell someone. Tell who? A teacher? The average teacher in public school is a moron who can't make it in the real world. And if there are any teachers listening to this, too bad. That's been my experience, and that's the experience of every kid who has or whose parents have reported bullying to the school, to the teachers, and nothing was done. Nothing was done. You can't expect children to deal with that effectively. If they commit suicide, that's a catastrophe. It's a tragedy. But there are other tragedies that could occur too. A couple of years ago, this boy who happened to be gay was going to school, and I believe it was either in I think it was a junior high school. From day one, the day school started, these two monsters, fellow children, were bullying him, tormenting him, pushing him around. Now, he reported it to the teachers. He reported it to the school authorities. They did nothing. And after a couple of weeks of this, every day, and by the way, this kid was a member of no gang. He was a good student. He bothered no one. His crime was he was gay, and that bothered these two little intolerant freaks. Well, he came to school finally one day with a knife, stabbed one of them in the chest and killed him, stabbed the other one, didn't kill him but wounded him. Now, was deadly force justified? No. But he is a child. He was a kid. He was left to his own devices when there were adults around who should have seen to his safety. Remember, schooling is compulsory. So it's a prison to begin with. He had to be there. Well, when you keep somebody in prison and you're not going to protect them? He's got to be there. He has no choice. The school did nothing. And the school generally does nothing. Why? Because they don't want trouble. They don't want to be bothered. They don't want the trouble of having to deal with this. It bothers them too much. Oh, can't it just go away? Well, it won't go away. As far as an adult is concerned, you got somebody trying to push you around, you deal with them. And you're learning how to do this with the instructional videos you're being taught. I'm not going to judge somebody who grabs my jacket. Well, all he's doing is grabbing my jacket. I don't want to hurt him for that. He's going to follow up with something, and I'm not going to give him the chance. Adults, bully, mugger, home invader, it's all the same. Children, remember, they have to learn how to fight back. Judo, Kodokan Judo, and Western boxing. And make sure you get a good teacher. A teacher that instructs them not only in the physical skills, but in the discipline, which will benefit them enormously. That's good for a child. And don't let a child believe that there's nobility in allowing himself to be a doormat. It's not true, and it shouldn't be suggested. It is right to fight back. It is right to contest with evil, whether it manifests as an 8-year-old kid attacking an 8-year-old kid, or a 35-year-old man trying to hold someone up, a 25 or 35-year-old person in the street. Bullying is evil. It must be dealt with severely. It must be dealt with swiftly and decisively. It is not a joke or a game. Train your child, train your children to fight back effectively. Let them have the confidence. More than that, let them have the moral rectitude to understand they are in the right. The bully is wrong. It's his fault. Injuries the bully sustains are the bully's responsibility. Keep that in mind, please.